The first note sounded like a whisper in the void. Ethan closed his eyes, feeling his fingers slide across the grand piano keys, but something inside him was wrong. He was playing not out of passion but out of obligation. The melody flowed perfectly, without flaws or dissonances, as if each sound was predestined. And that was the problem. There was no surprise. There was no emotion. Just the empty perfection that everyone called peace. The hall of the Harmonia Theater was packed. Still faces watched the stage, eyes fixed on Ethan. Men, women and children sat in impeccable rows, silenced by the subtle effect of the neurochord. Invisible to the senses, but present in every heartbeat. The frequencies resonated in everyone's minds, erasing conflicts and shaping emotions to create a society without hatred, fear or sadness. A utopia. Or a prison without bars. The musician pressed his lips together, feeling the sweat on his palms. The audience would applaud at the end, they always did. Not out of emotion but because it was expected. He took a deep breath, played the next sequence of notes, and then something unexpected happened. Chord outside the score. Dissonant, imperfect but alive. The sound cut through the air like lightning on a starless night. For an instant, the world seemed to hold its breath. The eyes in the audience blinked in confusion, as if something inside them had awoken from a deep sleep. Some stirred in their chairs. Others exchanged quick glances. And then silence set in again. Ethan folded his hands, his heart racing. Had it been a mistake? Or no? The echo of that note still vibrated in his ears, unlike any sound he had ever heard. He finished the piece without any more slips, the last notes dissipating into thin air. The audience, punctual as ever, applauded in unison, but Ethan knew that something had changed. Hours later, backstage, Ethan sat on a wooden bench, staring at his trembling hands. The theater was empty, but the echo of the chord remained in his mind. He picked up his cell phone to check for messages. Among the common notifications, there was one he didn't recognize. No sender. Just a short sentence. Music can liberate or imprison. Choose your role. The musician frowned. He felt a shiver run down his spine. The message disappeared from the screen as quickly as it had appeared, as if it had never existed. Ethan stood up, hearing the forbidden note echo in his mind. What had happened that night? And who had sent that message? As he walked down the empty corridor, the light from the lamps flickered slightly. For a split second, he felt that he wasn't alone. But when he turned around, only silence stared back at him. The silent chord had been struck. And the world was beginning to wake up. The echo of the dissonant chord never left Ethan's mind. Days had passed since the concert, but the memory of that unexpected sound continued to reverberate in his chest, like an unanswered question. The anonymous message didn't give him any peace either. Who had sent it? And what did free or imprison mean? In the dim light of his apartment, Ethan sat down at the piano. His fingers played the keys hesitantly, trying to recreate the sound that had escaped by accident. But he couldn't reproduce the chord exactly as before. Each attempt resulted in something close but not the same. As if the right note was always beyond his reach. The silence was broken by the sound of notifications on his cell phone. He hesitated before looking at the screen, but there were no more mysterious messages. Just a reminder of a rehearsal with the Harmonia Orchestra, scheduled for the following day. Sighing, he got up and walked over to the bookcase where he kept old sheet music. Something drew him to a leather-bound book, inherited from his grandfather, a pianist who had lived before the era of the neurochord. He leafed through the yellowed pages, his fingers tracing the handwritten notes, until something caught his eye. A sequence of chords written down in the margin, accompanied by the word awakening. Ethan's heart raced. The pattern of notes didn't fit any common scale, but there was something familiar there. He placed the sheet music on the piano and, with a deep sigh, played the sequence. The notes cut through the air like invisible blades. Something stirred inside him, a raw, intense emotion, unlike anything the neurochord allowed him to feel. For a moment, the world around him seemed to take on brighter colors. The sound echoed off the walls, reverberating like a whisper from another time. But before he could repeat the sequence, a strange noise stopped him. Something in the air seemed to vibrate, almost imperceptibly. He looked around, but there was no one. The feeling of being watched returned, just like in the theater that night. Taking a deep breath, Ethan put the sheet music in his coat pocket and left the apartment. He needed answers. The only person who could help him was Victor Hale, a former musician who had left the stage after the implementation of the neurocord. Ethan knew where to find him. In a discreet bar on the outskirts of the city, where the mind control system had less reach. As he walked through the neon-lit streets, he felt like a discordant note in the midst of the city's orderly symphony. Something was about to change, and Ethan knew that once he crossed that threshold, there would be no turning back. The dense air of the bar contrasted with the orderly world outside. The soft sound of a saxophone echoed in the dimly lit room, where voices whispered like forbidden notes. Ethan advanced between the tables, his heart racing. Every step felt like a challenge to the neurocord's invisible domain. At the back of the hall, Victor Hale raised his eyes from under the brim of his worn hat. His calloused fingers held a glass of whiskey, and the shadow of the past marked his gaze. Without a word, Ethan sat down in front of him, placing the sheet music found in his grandfather's book on the table. Victor's expression hardened as he recognized the chords written in the margins. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice hoarse from the time and the silence. "My grandfather. He played before the neurocord. This sequence. It causes something different. I need to understand what it means." Victor looked around before leaning over the table. "You shouldn't mess with those notes. They break the balance. The government calls them forbidden frequencies because they awaken parts of the brain that the neurocord has silenced. Raw emotions, forgotten memories. But also pains that the system has suppressed." He paused, as if remembering something. "I played those chords once." The audience reacted as if a veil had been torn. Some cried, others ran away. That's when I realized that this piece comes at a price. The loss of what makes us human. Victor's words resonated with Ethan. It was as if the dissonant note played in the theater had opened a rift in his mind, showing a glimpse of something long forgotten. "So there is a way to free people?" Ethan asked, almost in a whisper. Victor hesitated before answering. "Maybe. But the last person who tried was Icarus Blake, the creator of the neurocord. They say he composed a symphony capable of breaking the mind control, but the government destroyed it. Only fragments remained scattered in old sheet music. And some say that playing the entire symphony could have unpredictable consequences." Ethan felt a chill. The echo of the anonymous message seemed to pulse in his mind. "Music can liberate or imprison. Choose your role." Before he could reply, a sudden silence overtook the bar. Conversation ceased. Two men in dark suits had entered, their eyes scanning the room with clinical precision. Agents of global harmony. Victor touched Ethan's arm, whispering, "Go out the back." The musician grabbed his sheet music and, his heart pounding in his chest, headed for the back door. Behind him, he heard footsteps approaching. The first chord of the Forbidden Symphony echoed in his mind, like a promise of something he could no longer ignore. The echo of Ethan's footsteps reverberated in the narrow alley as he ran under the veil of night. The paper of the score crumpled in his sweaty hand. The distant sound of doors opening warned him that the agents were too close. His heart racing, he turned the corner and merged into the shadows until silence dominated the room. Hours later, back in his apartment, Ethan turned on a dim lamp and placed the sheet music on the table. Victor's words still resonated in his mind, a symphony capable of breaking mental control. But where could he find the rest of the notes? As he pondered, a metallic sound came from the door lock. Ethan turned quickly. Before he could react, a woman with short brown hair entered. Her eyes scanned the room with calculated agility. "Close the curtain. They could be watching," she said quietly. Ethan hesitated but obeyed. "Who are you?" he asked. "Lena. I worked for Global Harmony. Until I discovered the neurocord's true purpose. I know what you found, Ethan, and I can help you finish what Icarus Blake started." The name of the system's creator made Ethan shudder. "Why are you helping me?" he asked, still suspicious. "'Cause I've seen what their control does to people. Every note you played in the theater was a risk, but also a sign. You awakened something that can no longer be silenced." Lena took out a small portable hologram device from her pocket. "Watch this." The hologram projected the image of Icarus Blake in a darkened studio. His fingers moved across the keys of an old piano, while brain graphs changed in sync with each note. The recording was interrupted by the entrance of uniformed men. Blake's face disappeared as the hologram dissolved into thin air. "These are the last images of him before he disappeared," explained Lena. "But before he was captured, Blake left fragments of the symphony hidden in sheet music around the world. The chord he played was just the beginning, Ethan. We need to find the rest before they reinforce the system." The musician looked down at the score in his hands, feeling the weight of the decision. The last sentence of the anonymous message seemed to echo in the air. "Choose your role." Lena stepped forward, her gaze firm. "If we decide to continue, there will be no turning back. Are you ready for that?" The distant sound of sirens cut through the silence of the night, like a warning. Ethan took a deep breath, his heart beating to the rhythm of the unknown. "Let's finish what he started." As the shadow of the neurocord loomed over the city, the invisible maestro of freedom began to conduct his new symphony. The rain pounded the asphalt as Ethan and Lena snuck through the city's dark alleys. The neon signs were reflected in the puddles, distorting the colors into hypnotic patterns. The distant sound of sirens seemed to follow them at every step. "The next fragment is here," whispered Lena, pointing to an abandoned building whose faded sign still showed the worn letters. "Blake Conservatory." The name made Ethan's chest tighten. The building, once home to free music, now lay forgotten under the sway of neurocord. The wooden door creaked as Lena pushed it open, revealing a dust-covered lobby. In the center, a grand piano waited in silence, like a ghost from another time. "Hurry up. They might track us down if we take too long," she warned, rummaging through shelves full of yellowed sheet music. Ethan approached the piano, feeling the air filled with untold stories. His fingers touched a key, and the sound reverberated through the empty room. Something in the echo seemed to whisper forgotten secrets. Then he noticed an inscription carved into the wood next to the keyboard. "Freedom resonates in dissonance." Ethan's heart raced. He picked up the sheet music he had brought with him and, comparing it with the sheets Lena had found, began to decipher the hidden patterns. The combination of notes formed a fragmented melody, but one with the potential to break through the veil of the neurocord. "Here!" exclaimed Lena as she found a piece of the lost symphony. The notes seemed to dance across the page, promising and forbidden. The sudden sound of creaking wood upstairs made them both freeze. Someone else was there. Footsteps echoed down the corridor, slowly approaching. Lena switched off the flashlight, and pitch blackness engulfed the room. The only sound was the sound of restrained breathing. Ethan clutched the paper to his chest as Lena whispered close to his ear. "If they find us, don't let them take the sheet music. The future depends on it." The doorknob creaked, announcing the arrival of the stranger. Time seemed to hang in the air, and in the heart of the silence, the echo of resistance began to form, about to break the invisible chains of the neurocord. The creak of the door broke the silence of the conservatory. Ethan held his breath as Lena retreated into the shadows. The silhouette of a man appeared in the doorway, his watchful eyes scanning the hall. The metallic gleam of a communicator attached to his ear gave away his affiliation with Global Harmony. "I know you're here," said the firm voice. "Hand over the sheet music and there will be no consequences." Ethan's heart was pounding. He could feel the paper damp in his hand, but he couldn't let the fragment fall into their hands. The next moment, Lena lightly touched his shoulder and pointed to a side staircase that led to the upper floor. Silent as shadows, they began to climb. Each step creaked under their feet, but the agent's footsteps approached quickly. At the top of the stairs, a worn door led into an old rehearsal room. Lena pushed it open, revealing a space full of forgotten instruments. The smell of wood and old sheet music hung in the air. Ethan closed the door and leaned against it, trying to calm his panting. "We don't have much time," whispered Lena, turning on the flashlight. "We need to get out of here before he calls for reinforcements." Ethan's eyes roamed the room until they landed on a cello lying in the corner. Next to it, a fallen bookcase revealed pages scattered across the floor. Among them was a score with the same handwriting as the sequence Ethan had found in his grandfather's book. His heart leapt in his chest as he recognized yet another fragment of the symphony. "I've found another piece," he muttered, his fingers trembling as he picked up the sheet. The sound of the downstairs door being suddenly opened brought them back to reality. The agent was nearby. Lena pointed to a half-open window on the other side of the room. Without hesitation, Ethan crossed the cramped space and began to climb through the rusty frame. The cold night air cut across his face as he reached the sloping roof. Lena followed close behind, closing the window as she passed. Below them, the lights of the city stretched out like a sea of artificial stars. Ethan tucked the fragments of the symphony into his jacket, feeling the weight of responsibility increase with every note he discovered. The distant sound of sirens cut through the air as a reminder of the imminent danger. Lena touched his arm, her eyes reflecting the silent determination of someone who had already lost a lot, but hadn't given up. "We're getting closer. The next stage will be the riskiest," she said, her voice firm. "Are you ready to face the invisible maestro behind all this?" Ethan nodded, feeling the echo of the forbidden melody pulsing in his mind. He knew there was no turning back. The perfect harmony built by the neurochord was about to collapse. The cold air cut across Ethan's face as he and Lena descended from the roof into the narrow alley behind the conservatory. The sirens now echoed farther away, but danger still surrounded them. With the fragments of the symphony tucked under his jacket, Ethan felt the weight of hope and fear in equal measure. "We need to find the last fragment before they reinforce the system," said Lena, checking the communicator on her wrist. "Time is running out." Following the dimly lit streets, they came to an old building with boarded-up windows. Lena entered a code into the electronic lock, and the door opened with a discreet click. The interior revealed a makeshift hideaway. Old computers, dusty instruments, and murals full of musical notes. "Welcome to the silent orchestra," greeted a man with gray hair and a penetrating gaze. "I'm Armand, the last disciple of Icarus Blake." The name made Ethan's heart race. Before he could speak, Armand held out an aged piece of sheet music. The notes, drawn with almost obsessive precision, complemented the fragments Ethan was carrying. "This is the last piece of the symphony," Armand explained. "When played in its entirety, it can deactivate the neurochord, freeing imprisoned minds. But there's a risk. The central system is protected by blocking frequencies. We need to amplify the sound to overcome the barrier." Ethan analyzed the notes, feeling the melody forming in his mind. Each chord seemed to vibrate with the promise of freedom. "How will we transmit it?" he asked, determined. Armand pointed to a holographic screen showing the main stage of the Harmony Auditorium, the epicenter of mind control. "During the next global concert, neurochord's transmission will be at maximum. If we can infiltrate the symphony at that moment, we can reach millions of people at the same time. But we'll need a musician capable of performing the piece flawlessly." Lena's gaze met Ethan's. There was no doubt who would take on this responsibility. "I'll play," said Ethan, his voice firm despite the anxiety tightening his chest. The distant sound of sirens echoed through the city again, closer this time. Time was running out. The last symphony of humanity was about to be played, and the world would never be the same. Ethan and Lena advanced through the silent city, their shadows lengthened by the faded signs of the old advertising screens. The wind carried a distant murmur, an echo of the symphonies that once kept humanity in check. Now all that remained was the tension of a world on the brink of collapse. The auditorium loomed ahead like a sleeping giant, its dome gleaming under the pale lights of dawn. The doors were unlocked. It was as if the system itself was waiting for them for the final act. Ethan exchanged a look with Lena. There was no need for words. They both knew there was no turning back. Inside, the stage waited. The grand piano, symbol of human submission, rested under the spotlights. Lena put a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Make it quick. Once it starts, we won't have much time." Ethan nodded and sat down in front of the piano. His fingers brushed the keys, feeling the weight of fate on them. He took a deep breath. The last symphony was beginning. The first notes resounded through the empty auditorium, then spread through the neurocord network, traveling to every corner of the planet. The frequencies intertwined, dissolving the artificial harmony imposed by the system. Each chord destabilized the fragile balance of the collective illusion. The melody rose in waves, a crescendo of liberation and chaos. People awoke from their trance. The whispers of confusion became screams of dread. Without sound control, civilization lost its thread. Cities plunged into anarchy, and what had once been a harmonious world now shattered into conflicting realities. Lena watched from the back of the auditorium, feeling the sound waves reverberate through her body. She knew that this was the price of freedom. Too high a price, perhaps, but necessary. Ethan felt the final notes emerge from his hands like a breath of wind before the storm. The last note sounded, and with it, absolute silence overtook the world. The neurocord was dead, humanity free. When Lena turned around, Ethan was no longer there. Only the residual vibration of the piano and the certainty that his legend began there. Years later, amidst ruins and hopes, a young musician was rummaging through the rubble of an old auditorium. Under the dust of time, he found a yellowed score. At the bottom, a simple inscription. "Freedom has a price. Would you play the last note? Would you play the last note?" Comment below and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss anything new. The unknown still has a lot to teach us.